SavvyBusinessRadio.com, home to over 500,000 global listeners via our podcast and AM/FM platforms. We help business owners connect to successful individuals who share their gifts with the world. Get your message out in a bigger way with Savvy's live, professionally recorded shows. Find out more at SavvyBusinessRadio.com.
Today we're joined by esteemed pornographer Dave Pounder, who has produced, directed, and performed in adult films for over a decade, with over 100 titles to his credit. Dave is the executive producer and shares with us today his latest documentary, Risky Business, a look inside America's adult film industry. Find out more at davepounder.com. Hi, Dave. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing fabulous. And it's very interesting, Dave. We connected because somehow I started this new website called Strikingly, and we got together a new website for Savvy. And somehow my new website went out to like 1 million people, I guess anyone and everyone who's ever somehow come in contact with me. And you found out about my website and said, hey, if you'd like to have me on your show, give me a call. And I was like, whoa, yes.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how I got on the email list, but I'm glad that you emailed me.
Yeah, I was. Don't worry, I won't be emailing you again unless you.
You can. Email me anytime.
But I'm really, really happy to have you. You've written some wonderful book, Risky Business, the movie, actually, and then your book is Obscene Thoughts, a pornographer's perspective on sex, love, and dating. Fascinating because, when I was checking out your film, I had no idea that people who had used to work in the sex industry would be discriminated against later on when they're trying to get employment and such or be fired. And this was, I thought, a very important topic to bring up to the public. And as well, share with the audience a little bit about what they might not know about the porn industry, the misconceptions, the myth, and such. So before we head on to talking about the really juicy topic, share with our audience a little bit about your background, what brought you to getting involved in the porn industry.
Well, actually, it's funny. I met my first girlfriend ever. Well, I went to an all-guys Catholic high school, and everybody says, oh, that explains it. But, so my first experience really with dating was when I went to college at Michigan State. And I had this girlfriend, Leslie, who was awesome. And she was very attractive. She had, long blonde hair, blue eyes, size 3, big, natural, deep, everything, like this ideal kind of arm candy. And great girl, we hung out. And, being with her, after about 2 years, I was like, I wonder what it's like to have sex with other girls because I lost my virginity to her. Mm-hmm. And I realized that she wasn't really having it. She didn't, she's like, no, I don't want you to have sex with other girls. I'm like, why not? Like, who cares? You know what I mean? And so eventually when I got in, so I was with her for like 6 years all through college. A lot of my friends were out partying and I hooked up with this girl, hooked up with this girl. I was kind of jealous, Yeah. And but it was cool because I had a good relationship. And so when I got into grad school at Arizona, even though there was nothing wrong with our relationship, I'm like, you know what? I need to I felt like I kind of missed out on college. I mean, not generally speaking, but just sexually speaking.
Yeah.
So even though there's nothing wrong with our relationship, I'm like, we need to break up. And then I went to grad school. When I was at grad school, I'd go out to bars and stuff, and I would hook up with girls. And I realized the same pattern. These girls were always wanting relationships and investment and commitment, and guys were wanting sexual access. When I talked to women, they were like, oh, what's his major? What's he going to be, a lawyer, a doctor? What's his future? What's his ambition? And for guys, it's like, well, do you want to hook them up with a girl? What does she look like, etc. So eventually I realized that I sort of had this ethical dilemma of I wanted sexual access, but I really didn't want to hurt anybody in the process. So and then I discovered the swinger scene in California. Like, this is great. So like I was like this young guy, 22, and like, I'm attracted to all women. I don't care if they're older or younger. Like, so, to me, if I'm 20 and I'm having, I guess I was 23 in grad school, 22, and I was hooking up with some hot, 45-year-old MILF, so to speak, I was like, this is great. And the husband watches. I'm like, you can take pictures. I'm like, I don't care. And I thought it was this freak thing in Arizona. I didn't realize this was all over the world. So when I graduated, I had job offers at different companies, and the one I wanted was in California. And I said to the guy at the swingers club that owned it, I'm like, I'm really going to miss this place. He's like, where are you going? I'm like, well, the job I want's in Los Angeles, but I want to stay here to keep coming to this. And he's like, dude, this is even bigger in Los Angeles. I'm like, it is? He's like, yeah. So he gave me the name of a club, and then I went out there, and when I took a job at a bank, And I was working out there, and I got into the swinger scene there, and that's where I met people in the porn industry. And when I had the opportunity to do porn through meeting the people there, because they saw that I could perform at the swingers club in front of people, I thought it was a great opportunity. And it wasn't, a lot of people think I got into porn because it's sexual access to women. I already had that through the swingers world, and I even had it just generally speaking, when I was in graduate school. But the problem was I was hurting girls emotionally, not deliberately, just by the nature of being female. If we had sex and it didn't lead to something, they were oftentimes hurt. Or if I got bored after a while with the same girl sexually, she would be hurt. So to me, swinging was a ethical way to get sexual variety, and pornography was a great way to politicize that. So I went into porn knowing full well that there would be repercussions socially, but there were repercussions that I wanted to challenge. No different from a guy who's maybe secretly gay, and he lives in a society where they're firing gay teachers like they did back in the 80s or whatever it is, and saying, no, this is bullshit. Like, I'm not gay, but just say I were gay. And I would want to come out as the gay pride guy in the early beginning so that I could start this process that's already been happening now for gay rights, where gay people can now get married, they can transfer assets, they can have all of the same legal benefits that straight couples can. So I'm kind of, what Rosa Parks did for race relations or, anti-racial discrimination, and whoever the first gay guy is that did for gay rights, I want to do for, I guess, what you would call sexual freedom rights. If you're a teacher or a cop or whatever, and you're at a swingers club, just randomly, you shouldn't lose your job for that. If you're a radio host, they pick up your show and say, hey, we want you on CBS radio. And they hire you, and they find out that, oh my God, you used to play tennis, you don't get fired. Or, oh my God, you went to an opera, you don't get fired. Or you went to a nightclub, you don't get fired.
Yeah.
But the minute you go to a strip club, or the minute you go to a swingers club or a sex club, all of a sudden now you're fired. But that has nothing to do with your job whatsoever. And a lot of it stems from sort of bogus religious morality, the same thinking that discriminates against gay people, the same that discriminates against sexuality. What I think is particularly interesting is most of these sort of religious thought of discriminating against sex workers, if you will, or strippers or whatever, comes from religion. And all the religious people will tell the strippers and the porn stars, you need to get out of that. You should find another profession. It's bad. It's, whatever they want to say. And then when people do it, then they discriminate against you. It's like, well, make up your mind. I mean, you tell the person, get out of porn and get out of stripping. They get a job at an insurance company, and then you fire them. It's like, well, you're going to fire them.
Yeah. Dave, can I ask you
tell them,
Dave, it really, and I've been thinking about this question for a long, long time because, there was an ad I saw a couple of years ago is Kenneth Cole, and it drove me nuts. It was a whole bunch of 13-year-old boys and girls who were giving me the come hither look, and like they were any moment going to rip each other's clothes off and do the nasty. And I'm sitting there like, that shoe commercial. What does sex have to do with shoes? So there's just like this funky, crazy dichotomy in our country where sex is evil and bad and ooh, don't do that. But on the other hand, we use it all over the place to sell everything under the sun, from shoes to bubble gum to you name it. And so you mentioned the religious aspect, but why is it that we also want it so bad and we're like, it's good, but it's not? Where does that come from?
Well, again, so we have basic needs, food, shelter, clothing, sexuality. Sex, even according to Maslow, is a basic primary need. So denying people access to sex and sexual variety specifically is, at least for men, is tantamount to denying somebody adequate shelter or food or something along those lines. So think about a society dictated by religion where they say, the Bible says that you're only supposed to eat one meal a day. One meal a day, otherwise you're sinning. And not only that, but you have to eat the same food every day. You pick a food, you marry that food. So you take fettuccine Alfredo, and you love it. It's your favorite. It tastes the best. And that's it. That's what you're stuck with for life. But don't worry, it's your favorite food. But you only eat once a day. Just because you're instructed socially to eat once a day, or that you're only supposed to want one food, does it mean? And then you ask me the question. Well, why is it that all of a sudden you see all these people trying to sneak in meals, or they want different food, or they're stealing food, or they're putting advertising food with shoes? It's like, well, because you're restricting a basic need. So why are people, to answer your question, why is there sort of this double standard? Well, one is there's this religious morality that sex is somehow bad, which it isn't, especially when you compare us to other mammals that share similar, DNA makeup to us, like chimpanzees and bonobos, and how they behave sexually. And you're taking that natural biology and you're sort of conflicting it with social norms that come from basically these puritanical roots in the country, and it's very religiously based. I mean, when you look at abortion, for example, or contraception access, every single major respected public health institution, whether it's Johns Hopkins Public Health, the Rollins School of Public Health at Emory, or the School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins, I can't remember the name of it for some reason, the UCLA School of Public Health, UNC School of Public Health, Harvard School of Public Health, these are all Bloomberg School of Public Health, that's what it is over at Johns Hopkins. These are the top public health programs in the world, really. Yeah. And all of them, any professor there supports reproductive rights for women, supports contraception, and it's science-based. Completely science-based, you know? And who oppose? I mean, why do we talk about gay marriage and abortion in this country? Yeah. Because of this strong Christian base. Like, you don't have these issues in Australia. You know what I mean? Really? You don't have these issues in Western Europe. It's not a problem. In Amsterdam, they did a study of U.S. versus Amsterdam teens and found that even though the society is very permissive, it's expected that Amsterdam teens have sex with each other because that's what you do when you hit puberty. You're sexually mature by definition. And in the U.S., they try to discourage kids, or, post-pubescent teens from having sex. But the difference is when you're sexually mature, you want to have sex. So it doesn't matter what the culture is. It's like the food analogy. People are going to do it the same. The only difference is Americans get pregnant a hell of a lot more because they don't have access to contraception, as easy an access to contraception, as easy an access to sex education. I mean, where I live, Palm Beach County, Florida, which is considered progressive for Florida. I mean, even in Palm Beach County schools, we don't have comprehensive sex education. We have what's called abstinence plus. And even though, which means that we don't talk about LGBT issues, we don't talk about a lot of other things that are very important. The Center for Disease Control in Atlanta has this family health and human sexuality, I think it's called comprehensive sex ed program, which was adopted a couple of years ago by the Broward County School Board, so we're making slight progress, you know, but it's silly to me that you don't talk about these things when you have all this science that supports it. It's crazy. And then you go to a place like California, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, they all have comprehensive sex ed. They're also much more progressive. And then you go to like the middle of the country, like Alabama, Iowa, these places have the abstinence, which we know doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't, because kids they feel this intense sexual urge, but then you're told it's evil and bad. I mean, and it's really, really crazy. I remember my mom saying when I was a kid, stop wiggling your butt when you walk down the street. I'm just walking naturally. My hips sway naturally. I'm like, but I'm made to feel like, oh, don't move those hips. You might make a guy want to do something to you. But, Dave, this brings up something interesting because it is kind of nutters. I think I heard recently that according to some religions that now contraceptive is okay. And I think as God has given us the idea of free will, the idea to choose to, hey, I don't want to have a billion babies. I have a brain in my head. So I'm going to use this contraception so that I don't have a billion babies, and I can not put a burden on society and not have a burden that I can't handle. Because having, like my grandma said, when she first came to New York, or my great-grandma came here, they lived in the same building. We all grew up in Manhattan. We all lived in the exact same building my great-grandma lived in. And she said when they first came from the old country, they would have there was no contraception. You would have 20 babies in one apartment. It was crazy.
Right.
But what does that do to you? You can't feed all those babies. How are they going to be sustainable, great people for the culture when you're putting out more than you can responsibly take care of? So, I mean, you have to, as human beings, be able to look at it logically. And for me personally, abortion is wrong because it's a baby. But as far as contraception, I think why not really teach that so kids don't get pregnant at 14? And because they're like, I can't take care of a baby. I'm 14 years old. So it's just a lot of crazy stuff going on. But what really, really amazed me, Dave, is I didn't know that anyone who had worked in the porn industry would maybe have a problem later on and get fired for having worked there at one time in the sex industry. I was like, that's crazy. Why does that happen? And what are you doing to try to help about that? Because I know you've put together your movie to try to alert the public risky business. Tell us more about that.
Well, again, I mean, just like gay rights, I think all of this opposition to people who have exercised sexual expression or sexual autonomy or these alleged rights that we have to do these things, you know, it's really, again, the opposition comes, or the problem, the complaints, et cetera, come from the religious people or religious community, et cetera. So the first thing is, and I knew full well that there was going to be issues. So that's why I got into it. I like to challenge these things. It's fun for me. I can't help it. You know, so the thing is, you know, I do a lot of activism. I volunteer doing legal work with the ACLU, with, you know, I do active with the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Americans United for Separation of Church and State. The idea, I think, one, is to get people to identify as non-religious. I think that's important for census purposes. Like a lot of the church, so to speak, has support because they have power in numbers. And I think if people say, what's interesting to me is what you said earlier about how, you know, the church is changing its position on contraception. Well, if all of this stuff comes from God, who gives these humans the ability to just change and go, oh, now being gay is okay, we should accept it. You know, now it's okay. Like, because they don't want to lose numbers. They don't want to, you know, they have to keep it current, otherwise they're going to lose numbers. I wish more people would say, okay, listen, I realize that I was raised of a certain religion. I don't subscribe to the religion or to, you know, a lot of it. Therefore, I'm just going to identify as a spiritual, ethical person that's not going to cause harm to others, identify as non-religious, whatever. And when you get your census form, you know, whenever it comes, or if somebody asks you what your religion is, unless you actually truly believe what they're saying, you know, and truly believe what these books say to do, then don't select the box. You know, select the box like most people in Western Europe do, or most people in Australia do. They just say you're either, you know, have no religion, or that you're just spiritual but not religious, or you know, whatever it is, because then it takes away the political power from these sort of power and numbers groups. And I tell people, you know, it's important. Like, you know, people who go to church and stuff, they you know, they give money, and then that money is then used to fund these causes against what I would call secular pluralism. So people who aren't religious, they should at least contribute to the ACLU, to Americans United for Separation of Church and State, to the Center for Inquiry, to Freedom from Religion Foundation. You know, there's so many groups that work tirelessly to prevent discrimination against LGBT, to prevent, you know, people from enacting policies that restrict contraception access to people. Again, none of this is from public. I mean, these are all public health issues. Okay, whether it's contraception.
Yeah, Dave, can I ask you something? How important do you think, or how big of a role should you think government play in, like, protecting sex workers? Because often I feel like the government really plays a big role in getting involved in things like that I don't think they should even be involved in. Like, even marriage. I heard the marriage certificate came about because they wanted to prevent whites and blacks getting married. I'm like, well, who is the government to tell me whom I can marry? It's none of their darn business who I decide to marry, right?
I agree.
Yeah, so how much should the government play a role, or city or local law play a role, or not? Should they just totally butt out in relations to sex and marriage and that type of thing? Or,
all right, so what happens is there's two. The problem is the word marriage. So what happens is there's marriage in a religious sense of we're going to do what the Bible or the Quran, whatever says about us being together and whatever that specific religion wants to do. And I think that marriage should be determined by whatever church you're a member of, and that's your own thing. And it has no legal benefit whatsoever. It's something you do socially. And then there's the state's involvement in having the ability to transfer assets upon death, or to be able to, you know, say, visit your loved one in a hospital, or, you know, get access to certain medical information. So in other words, historically, if a man and woman were married and the husband died, the wife would inherit the assets, and you could possibly avoid probate and do all these other things if you had a will crafted correctly. Where, you know, and if you were gay, you couldn't, because you weren't allowed to be legally married. So in my view, I think the best thing is to actually get rid of the word marriage altogether in the government sphere and just call it a civil union. Whether you're gay or straight, you can civilly attach yourself to one person, whoever that person is, and you can confer and, you know, receive all the legal benefits that come with that. And then all the church people who talk about all this God marriage stuff can do whatever they want to do within their own church about who can go to the church, who can't go to the church, whatever. So there's that. And what was interesting is historically you needed the government to protect you from anti-discrimination. You needed the government to come in and say, okay, we are going to desegregate the schools. We are going to allow women the right to vote and the right to work. The government was stepping in and preventing corporations from exercising anti-discrimination. Now it's the opposite.
Yes.
Now these sort of religious groups have a stronghold on the politicians, and it's the opposite. Now you see these transgender bathroom bills in North Carolina that get passed by the government, and then corporations say, we're not going to host our NCAA tournament there. We're not going to do our big business convention there. We're not going to open a manufacturing plant there because you are discriminating against transgender people. So now, ironically, you have the businesses protecting the citizens from its own government, which I think is really
crazy.
Which I think is really telling. You know what I mean? In terms of that. So I think that there shouldn't be any discrimination when it comes to public accommodations, public housing, things along those lines. But there's also arguments to be made against. In other words, I think people should be able to do what they want individually. Yeah. And they'll even say, and there's arguments for this, which I kind of support in many ways, that if you want to be able to discriminate against people, whatever it is, their race, their gender, their past employment, whatever it is, that you should be able to do that. And I kind of agree with that, because it's like, to me, if I'm renting out my house and I find that, let's just say from my experience, that women don't pay rent as much as men, I'll just say hypothetically that were the case, I should be able as a property owner to be like, well, I only want to rent to men. I only want to rent to black people. If I want, it's my house. But the government shouldn't be able to discriminate. The government shouldn't be able to say, you can attend a public school, but you can't. You can work as a city garbage collector, but you can't. So when it comes to publicly funded purse that everybody's contributing to, then I think there should be no discrimination at all. But if you're a private owner, then I think you should be able to discriminate however you want, and then you can, because there's always retribution, right? So like if you are doing something, say Burger King says we're not going to serve black people, then people can protest Burger King. You can hurt their profits. Yeah. But if the government says, well, we're not going to allow black people to go to school, then there's nothing they can do, and they still get a tax bill, on the property they own to pay for the school that they're not allowed to go to. There's no way for them to have any kind of consequence for that action. They're kind of stuck. There's nothing they can do. So I think that could be a test. And I'm a libertarian in terms of, let people do whatever they want to do as long as it doesn't affect other people negatively. Yeah.
Well, I think the government has gotten a little out of hand, a little bit too big for its britches, I think, but, for each to decide their own. Now, when it comes to health mandates, when I was checking out your film, my father grew up in Germany, and in Amsterdam and even Germany, I recall him saying that the government looks out and they have legalized prostitutes and such, so that, the government protects to make sure that these people are tested every 6 weeks, they don't have AIDS, they don't have venereal diseases.
Correct.
Because they want to protect the public, but also the people who are working as sex workers. But we don't have anything like that in our country now here. Correct, in the United States.
Right. Well, no, we do in remote counties of Nevada. And what's interesting about those the remote counties of Nevada, where they allow places like the Bunny Ranch and stuff, is they have never had a single transmission of HIV at the Bunny Ranch. And the thing is it's a basic economic supply and demand question. So the prices there, I've never been. I mean, I would go, but the prices there are going to be, very high, I assume, because of the demand, let's say, versus the supply. But that's why a lot of people just, go off Backpage or whatever if they're going to hire prostitutes. But you make a good point, which is that most of the developed nations allow prostitution. Australia, like in Queensland over by Brisbane, like there's legal regulated prostitution. Same with Germany, same with Amsterdam, same with France. Most of Western Europe and Australia and developed nations have, what you're going to notice, and by the way, and again, why don't we have it here? It's not public health, it's religion. And the thing is, you're going to notice a huge difference. It's literally almost a perfect one-to-one correlation of level of women's rights and freedom, how women are treated in a society, and availability of prostitution. If you look at societies where women have the most freedoms, countries like Amsterdam, for example, or Canada or Australia, prostitution is legal there. Where if you, and when I say prostitution, I'm not talking about just brothels or, let's say it's decriminalized, where if a girl wanted to put an ad and say, hey, I'll give you a blowjob for $50, you can do that without risk of jail time. Now look at the places that are the most restrictive on sexual access. Places like Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, and look at the women's rights there. Look at how women are treated there. And you will see a complete linear relationship between women's rights and level of how women are treated in society. And as that increases, so does available access to prostitution. And the thing is if you're a girl, let's say you say, screw this radio show, I'm done with this stuff. I want to go, give blowjobs for $100. Like, not that you would do that, but if you want to do that, who's the government to tell you that you can't? And if I want to pay you for that service, if I'm like, hey, I kind of feel like this, like, there's a difference between kidnapping and human trafficking and this illegal stuff versus consensual, I want to make a choice to do this type of work, which I think should be
up to
there shouldn't be barriers to do that.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting, Dave, is that being such a religious biased country, at least in thought, is that the pornography industry it wouldn't exist without the demand, and there's a huge amount of demand. I'm guessing pretty much a lot of people out there who are having demand of it and using it, going on the internet and downloading stuff, are people who go to church every week. So, and they're the same people who say, "Oh, pornography is evil and bad," but it wouldn't exist if we weren't buying it. So, I mean, the other side. So it makes no sense. It's like, if
I don't think they think it's bad. I think they say it's bad because you have to say it's bad. You know what I mean? It's kind of like gay people who are gay that are like, oh, those damn gays, even though they're gay. They're just trying to, there was this, Elliot Spitzer, he was a politician. He was trying to outlaw prostitution while using prostitution at the same time, like, because he has to publicly say, oh, I'm against prostitution, I'm against this kind of stuff. I mean, you got John Edwards, who's Mr. Family Values guy running for president on the Family Values platform, who cheats on his wife, fathers a kid with the mistress. Like, I mean, it's completely, Newt Gingrich, same thing. He wants to impeach Bill Clinton for getting a blowjob. Meanwhile, he's cheated on every wife he's ever had, notoriously. So it just doesn't make any sense. But I think what's important is for people who are non-religious and secular to be more politically active. If there's one thing that the church does well, is it's well organized, it's very well politically connected. And I mean, look, they just had this nationally televised Catholic Charities Foundation dinner with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. You know, they don't do that for, why aren't they doing that for the environmental group or for, Planned Parenthood or, for whatever else? It's because the church is so politically well organized. The only secular group I know that's as well organized as the church is possibly the NRA, which has a lot of power. But if secular people or people who reject this sort of, I would call it theocracy injected into politics, which is partially in the U.S. I mean, it's not as bad as some places in the Middle East, but if they would just contribute to pay your $40 a year and join groups like the ACLU and Americans United and Freedom from, and do that. I mean, the same way that people go to church and they put, $1 or $5 in the pot every week. And if you go 52 weeks a year, you put in $5, that's $260 a year. So take that $260 you would have spent had you, went to church and just contribute to these groups. And they fight on your behalf to allow multitudes of religious viewpoints, to be available, not just one, and I think that that's important. Is you need secular people to run for office. You know what I mean?
God. Yes. Yeah, and that's more. Dave, I hear more and more people complaining about what we see in politics today. Oh, it's horrible, the choices we get. It's choose or less of the two evils or whatever they say. I'm like, why are we choosing evil at all, people? Why is evil acceptable? I mean, like, if you don't like what you see, do something about it. Say something about it. Like, this is partly why we have Savvy, is to really help people get the message out and to have different points of view. But really get out there and do something in whatever gift and talent you have to talk about your views. If you don't talk about it and really get your views out there, then you stand for nothing. If you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. If you don't want to rock the boat because it feels comfortable, you stand for nothing.
Right. Yeah? And freedom isn't free.
Absolutely. Well, Dave, I want to thank you. This has been totally informative. Hopefully get some people off their butts and really contributing to whatever their deep held beliefs are, because a lot of what we see going on in the government and around the world, I know most of us don't agree with. Hurting the environment, hurting each other. I know that as a populace and as a world, we don't agree with this, but it's time for us to start standing up and start speaking out. And I thank you for coming here to speak out and share your gifts and wisdom today on Savvy Business Radio.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
After 5 years of creating exciting business content with amazing businesses from around the world, Savvy is now creating a new video series entitled Heartbeat of the World. This series will feature experts from around the globe. We will highlight and discuss some of the greatest challenges facing the U.S. and the world. Co-create with us and find out more at bit.ly/savvypatron.